Good afternoon, everybody. Hey, my name is Dave Klotz. I'm the sales director with DQE Communications here in Pittsburgh, and it's my pleasure to announce our last speaker for this afternoon. Before I do that, we are having a couple giveaways at the end of every session. So I know some of you have been with us, haven't heard this before. There you go. If you haven't heard it before, stick a business card into the bowl. It's our way of thanking you for attending, and it's also our way to gather a little data off your business cards. With that said, real quickly about DQE Communications, we're really the premier fiber provider in Western Pennsylvania, and the reason we say that is that we actually own and operate more fiber miles, over 3,000, than any of our competitors. And we're connected to over 1,400 buildings. I shouldn't say buildings, locations, because some of those are towers, but to 1,400 locations in Western Pennsylvania. We also have the reputation of one of the most reliable and available networks in Western Pennsylvania, and that's in part due to the unique way that we kind of put our topography together, our topology together. So if you need more information on that, please feel free to ask any of us from DQE, and we can fill you in. Last comment I'd like to make about DQE is that there's only two fiber providers in Western Pennsylvania, and they're both regional, who have their own network operations center, and DQE is one of them. We're very proud of that because it gets us very close to our customers. We own it, we operate it, we staff it, and we know what our customers' requirements are. So with that, it's my pleasure to announce our last speaker for this afternoon, who will cover the mission of the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub. And it's a nonprofit organization, and it's my pleasure to announce their executive director. So please join me in welcoming Rene Baston.
Thank you very much. Am I live? Can you hear me? I'm going to use this. I may walk around a little bit because...
Sorry, you don't need that.
Yeah, that's okay. Thanks. I'll walk around. I'm not used to being this high up off the ground, actually, so I'll walk around a little bit over here. So thank you all for your stamina. I would sing. My wife and I are big karaokeers, but I need the words to scroll on the screen, so that would not be good with my presentation. The Northeast Big Data Hub, first, before I go into this, I didn't put the title on my slides, but does anybody know the reference for the name of this event? Anybody? So there are like two people. All right, so I tried to riff off of that. And my talk was formally called Building Cross-Sector Crews for the Notorious B.I.G. Data. And there is a point to that, and actually connects to our mission of the organization. So the Northeast Big Data Hub is an NSF-seeded set of organizations. There are 4 of us around the country, and I'll talk a little bit about the organization and the mission. We're each hosted in either one or multiple universities, mostly because the NSF is familiar with that, and we get to take advantage of the infrastructure at the university and all of these types of things. And we're very fortunate to be based at Columbia University, and we're coordinated by Columbia. It's important that I say this because we're not in the service exclusively of Columbia University. We're in the service of the entire Northeast, and between the 4 hubs, we're in the service of the entire country. So we're hosted at Columbia, gratefully hosted there because I also used to work at the Data Science Institute, and our PI happens to be the director of the Data Science Institute, Kathy McEwen, who's been really a great help for us in our first year. We've only been around for about a year in getting up and running. So I'd like to start with this slide, and a few folks throughout the day kind of alluded to this. I'm going to give you a tech talk that's about people, not about tech, really. So I love this slide because it's the world of humans, and the digital world is superimposed on it. And notice that the digital world represented by that iPhone is still much smaller. And the notion for me here is we have to remember that all of these things that we're doing, all of these technology-related activities are in the service of humans, right? The thing you can't separate from human endeavors is the humans. And sometimes it's easy to forget that when we dive deep into the technology. The other point is that some of the challenges in disseminating data-driven solutions into the world, which is part of our mission, are really people challenges more than technological challenges. So sure, there are technological challenges, and we're making progress in some, and not as fast in other areas. But by far, the bigger challenges are cultural challenges, regulatory challenges, a lot of other things that fall into that people category. And I think it's important to remember that, particularly for us as we're trying to get data-driven solutions out into the world, you can't do it in isolation. It's not just a technology problem. So back to us and our mission. So we represent these 9 states in the Northeast. Over the last year, we've gotten a lot of good momentum going. We have over 250 individuals and over 100 organizations that are participating in some way, shape, or form with the hub. And the collective mission across the hubs is to build teams across sectors, industry, academia, government, nonprofit, to try to create data-driven solutions to real-world challenges. And these could be things that are societal challenges writ large, or they can be challenges that are faced by an industry, as an example. So just to give you a sense of how we're laid out, when each of the hubs was created, the NSF decided to create the 4 hubs separately and to let each of them figure out how to fulfill their mission within their geographies. So we all went out to our communities to try to understand what are the needs and the challenges faced by the community, what areas should we focus in on. So these are our priority areas. Around the middle of this set of concentric circles are our vertical priority areas, and around the edges are our horizontal priority areas. I'll talk a little bit more about the horizontal ones, actually. The other ones are pretty easy to figure out what they do. The horizontal ones, I think, are critically important because they're all enabling areas. So everything from data literacy to data sharing to privacy and security and to ethics. If we don't get these right as we're trying to get these solutions out into the world, the potential backlash can be quite extreme. So we want to be sure that we're addressing all of these as we try to build these other vertical areas in health and energy and smart cities, et cetera. So I'm going to give you a few examples of projects that were just funded this year. So one of the other things that the NSF did is, besides funding the hubs themselves, which serve as something of an alliance builder and a brain trust across sectors in data science and across our geographies, they've also seeded specific projects in our priority areas, either vertical or horizontal ones. So this was a grant-based activity where people proposed specific projects, either full projects or planning proposals, and they were awarded based on their merits across the different hubs. So these are the ones that the Northeast did. I'm assuming you're all from the Northeast, so I'll say that we did quite well relative to the rest of the country. So we got 7 projects that were funded this year. And the other thing that I'll say before I move on and talk about the projects is, this is just the beginning. So this is meant to be a seed for us, and part of what we're trying to do is discover the value that we can add across these sectors, industry, academia, government, et cetera, that allows us to move beyond just this initial seed stage funding from the NSF. But it's off to a good start. I'm not going to get into the technology so much in each of these projects. I want to focus again on some of the people aspects and on our ability to build these cross-sector partnerships. So the first is a project that we were awarded in the health space, which happens to have a large representation here in Pittsburgh. PSC is part of the project. The Center for Causal Discovery is part of the project. University of Pittsburgh is part of the project. And the general idea here, it's a long title, unfortunately, but the general idea here is that a lot of health research is performed on either genomic data or clinical data. And that data set leaves a lot of other data that may actually have a causal role in disease out of the equation. That's one challenge that the project is trying to solve. The other challenge is that a lot of epidemiological studies tend to be focused on correlation as opposed to causation. And that's another challenge that this project is trying to solve. I'll give you a little bit of depth in this one, and then the other ones I'll just give you a higher level information. But just to give you a sense, if you look on the far side of the slide, you'll see that there are a lot of federal agencies are represented. Did I just go out of full screen? All right. So a lot of federal agencies are represented. So it's 5 federal agencies, everything from NASA to the CDC, where data is being brought into the exposome database that's being developed at Harvard Medical School. In the middle of the slide, you see the academic partners. So it's Harvard Medical School, Columbia University, University of Pittsburgh, and Penn State. And then on the right side, you see our stand-in for industry, which is Partners Healthcare, which is a quasi-industry, very large health network in the Boston area. And this is just the beginning of what we're doing in terms of bringing all of these partnerships together. We're also speaking to some large data vendors. So as an example, you see that the census is about in the middle of those federal agencies. The problem with census data is that the data is only collected every 10 years. So we're working with data vendors who collect data on multiple times during the course of a year to try to get them a richer data set. So what are they trying to do with this? They're trying to create what's called an exposome data set and create causal models with the combined clinical data of this very large consortia that Columbia helps to coordinate, called the Odyssey Consortium, which has over 700 million patient records from around the world. And bringing that together with the exposome data set, which means everything from environmental exposure to toxins, to allergens, to sociodemographic factors, to migration pattern of people, et cetera, and then to try to understand how all of these factors are actually causing different disease states. So it's a very interesting project from our perspective, and also a great illustration of how we're able to bring partnerships together across different sectors. This is one of our horizontal area project, priority area projects, so it's focused on data sharing. And the idea behind this project is a lot of the challenges in data sharing on the open data side. There are a lot of organizations that are trying to address them. Nobody really seems to be focused on this intersection between open and closed data, and for the foreseeable future, this is still going to be a substantial need. So this project is trying to address how do we create a platform that allows both open and closed data to be shared effectively? And it's doing it in a very practical way by trying to understand what some of the early hurdles are to sharing data. So the first one that this project is focused on is licensing of the data. So what are the different agreements, data sharing agreements, that are out in the world? What they're discovering is that in many cases it takes six to 9 months or longer to create a data sharing agreement. Folks are reinventing them. And that's a fundamental challenge to sharing data effectively and quickly. So what they're trying to do is, in this case, trying to address this by creating maybe an umbrella data agreement that captures, let's say, 60 or 70% of what needs to be negotiated, so that you're only negotiating a 30 or 40% of it, and then embeds it in the underlying platform so that when somebody logs in, you already know what data they have access to, what IP rights they have access to, et cetera, et cetera. But again, I think one of the biggest points of this is this was the launch event for this workshop. And in that photo, you have representatives from GE, Experian, Comcast, IMS Health, a lot of companies, federal agencies including DARPA, the NIH, the NSF, DHS. We've got universities including University of Pittsburgh, Penn State, Columbia, Harvard, and actually some folks that came from different parts of the country. So again, a big part of what we're doing is bringing folks across these sectors and across the geography together to try to accomplish something that they can't do on their own. This was another large challenge project we were just talking about, which is Grand Challenges in Data-Driven Education. This one is really focused on trying to understand what the best practices are in the education space. A lot of advances in e-learning over the years, which I think you can speak to a lot better than I can. But the idea here is, again, combining the technology with the people. One of the very strong aspects of this project is that not only is it trying to get the best of breed for e-learning solutions and then try to fill the gaps where gaps exist, things like allowing more adaptive learning solutions for students that understand when students are frustrated or when they're more advanced than the curriculum that they're being served, but also bringing in the teachers and the administrators, helping them to understand how to more effectively use these solutions, because frequently the practitioner knowledge gap that these solutions are being created for is not addressed. And this is one of the things that we're trying to embed in all of the projects that we launch. I'll go relatively quickly. I don't know if anybody's keeping track of time, but to get you all to your drinks. So this is an energy cycle innovation planning proposal that's taking a novel approach, focusing on a very precise use case where there's a large brownfield redevelopment effort that's happening in Buffalo. They're taking advantage of that to try to more effective, and there's an enormous amount of energy-related requirements to this brownfield redevelopment. So this project is trying to take advantage of this to try to launch a larger project to model the entire energy ecosystem from generation through distribution to use with a very specific use case in mind. we have two planning proposals in cybersecurity, one that's focused on interinstitutional cyber awareness. So the notion here is that at the early stages of a cyber attack, to have the analysts be able to speak to each other more effectively, to really understand what's going on, and to be able to share what approaches they've taken in the early stages of a cyber attack. And the other one is a little bit more general, which may tie into other projects that we're doing actually to try to help the insurance industry better understand how to underwrite cybersecurity risk. But for us, it serves multiple purposes because it allows us to take a look at the landscape and understand where the best practices are, what the gaps are in the cybersecurity space, and then again, with a very specific use case in mind, to try to roll out solutions that take advantage of the knowledge that we've gained here that are big data related solutions. The final project is a planning proposal in big data literacy. So for us, this area is a fairly broad area. It's not just about teaching students how to code and mathematical skills, et cetera. There's a broader need for data literacy, which ranges from everyday users understanding how these algorithms, these approaches are impacting their lives, everything from voting to their jobs, to also helping practitioners, whether it's executives, decision makers, et cetera, understand how to build and use their data teams more effectively. I think the talk during lunch was discussing how frequently executives get the output of their data science team and they say, okay, this is the answer, but it's not usually black and white. There are a lot of shades of gray in whether this is an answer that you can rely on or not. And what we're finding is that a lot of folks in the business world or practitioners in any area, in science, et cetera, don't have a full understanding of how to leverage those teams. And conversely, those teams don't necessarily have an understanding that's deep enough in the areas in which they're operating. So broadly, this area is focused on trying to bridge that gap. And specifically, this project is going to be focused on lifelong learners. We're very happy to be partnered with the New York Hall of Science, which was founded during the World's Fair in 1948. They have decades of experience really conveying complex scientific concepts to the general public. So they're working with us on this project, among a number of others. So I'll end with this in homage to Pennsylvania. On my way to the data sharing workshop in Philly, which was the first workshop that we held ourselves as an organization, the Northeast Big Data Hub, other than our annual meeting, I got an Uber, and my Uber driver was this guy here, Carl. So as we're driving on a really wet, rainy day in which traffic was at a standstill, Carl was complaining about the state of the drivers in Philadelphia. He said, they're awful drivers. We were at a four-way stop, nobody was moving. Then he started talking about being a post-retirement Uber driver. So we got a little bit of what it's like post-retirement. He meets a lot of interesting people, et cetera. Then he started complaining about the Uber algorithms, which of course, as I'm going to my data sharing workshop, made me stand up and take notice. So I asked Carl, what's your background? And he says, well, I'm a retired mechanical engineer. So this is a great example of what we're trying to accomplish, particularly with data literacy, but more broadly. We're trying to create a framework in which guys like Carl, who is interested enough to learn something about data science and something about how it impacts his work, to do what he did, which is actually start to take a Python course. And he actually even wrote a little code for my son before I got out of the car. So I thought this was the most auspicious beginning to a data sharing workshop that you could possibly have. And this is a great illustration of what we're trying to accomplish as a hub. We're trying to cross sectors, and we're trying to enable data science solutions that are for real people and take advantage of the needs that they have and also understand the challenges that they have, so we can disseminate these solutions more broadly in the world. Thank you. Any questions, or you want to get a drink before you ask a question? We had one.
In the lines of data sharing, you mentioned about U.S. Census data, and one of the challenges always has been that there is 300 million U.S. population. I should be able to get all the demographic data one time. And U.S. Census data is old,
Yep.
but the DMV has good adult population data with good demographic information. All the DMVs have. Are you guys doing anything around that data sharing?
So part of what we're trying to do in this particular case, so vendors like Experian, as an example, most people think of them as FICO score companies. they're also marketing companies, and they also happen to collect very rich data. And in their case, they have a database of 2 billion individuals. And we're trying to bring them over to the light side. And I say that jokingly because I have a very good relationship with them, with a startup that I founded previously. But they've been very gracious in allowing us to share that data with our stakeholders. And they have much more frequent data collection on individuals that can supplement what's going on with census. The other thing that I'll mention is recently I was put in touch with folks at RTI, the Research Triangle Institute, and they've created a very interesting synthetic person data set. So the Census Bureau, and I'm going to blank on the acronym of the initiative within the Census Bureau, but they actually have another data collection effort which collects data, I think, on an annual basis. And they're using this to create essentially probabilistic models of humans within a certain geography. And they've gotten some really fantastic results with this. So there are ways of supplementing the gaps in the census data that we're starting to roll out with our stakeholders.
Is that publicly available?
I think it is, yeah. If you're interested, I'm blanking right now, but I can send you the information. Yeah. All right, thank you all very much.